My ex-wife cheated and left when my son was 9. I raised him alone. At his wedding, she sat at the head table. My name wasn't on any seating chart. I stood outside and watched her give a speech through the window. He texted 3 weeks later. "You didn't even say goodbye. My name's Nolan. I'm 47, and I want to tell you about the night I stood outside a banquet hall in a rented suit, watching my ex-wife give a toast at my son's wedding through a window while I held a plate of appetizers that a caterer handed me because she thought I was one of the vendors." That's not a metaphor. That actually happened. And somehow, that wasn't even the worst part of my night. Let me back up, because if I just start there, you're going to think I'm some deadbeat dad who deserved to be left outside like a stray cat. I promise you I'm not. But I need you to understand the full picture before you decide who the villain is here. Spoiler alert, it's not me. But I'll let you be the judge. I married Jolene when I was 24. She was 22, fresh out of college with a communications degree she never once used, and a smile that could make you forget your own middle name. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue in Austin, and within 6 months I was down on one knee in her parents' living room like an idiot with a ring I couldn't afford and a speech I'd rehearsed 14 times in my bathroom mirror. She said yes. Her dad looked like he wanted to say something else entirely, but he shook my hand and told me to take care of his little girl. I swore I would, and for a while I did. We got a little apartment off South Lamar, the kind with thin walls and a kitchen so small you had to choose between opening the fridge or standing in it. I was working as a welder at a fabrication shop, pulling 50-hour weeks. Jolene worked part-time at a boutique downtown, but mostly talked about wanting to be an influencer, which in 2005 basically meant she wanted a blog and a nice camera. I bought her the camera. I thought we were building something. When our son Archer was born, I thought my chest was going to explode. Not from fear, from love. This tiny little dude with a full head of dark hair just staring up at me like I was the most important person on the planet. And for the first few years, everything felt like it was working. I got promoted to lead welder. Jolene stayed home with Archer, and we moved into a small house in Round Rock with a backyard big enough for a swing set. I built it myself on a Saturday while Archer sat in his little bouncer and watched me drill every bolt. Here's the thing about Jolene, though. She was the kind of person who always needed to feel like she was the main character. Not in a mean way at first, just in a way that meant if the spotlight wasn't on her, she got restless. When Archer started school and didn't need her every second, she started going out more. Girls' nights, weekend trips, a new group of friends I'd never met who all seemed to have a lot of opinions about how boring our life was. I didn't think much of it. I figured she was just adjusting. I was tired too. Welding all day and coming home to bath time and homework and fixing the dishwasher for the 3rd time that month isn't exactly glamorous. But I loved it. I loved being Archer's dad. I loved sitting on the back porch with him catching fireflies in a jar while Jolene was inside scrolling on her phone. I didn't notice the distance growing because I was too busy being present for the one person who actually wanted me there. The affair started when Archer was 8. I didn't find out until he was 9. His name was Cordell, which sounds like a villain in a Western, and honestly, that's pretty fitting. He was a real estate agent with bleached teeth and a leased BMW, who Jolene met through one of her friends. I found out the way most people do, which is to say I found a text message that made my stomach drop through the floor. It wasn't even something dramatic. It was just her texting him a heart emoji with the words, "Last night was perfect," at 6 in the morning while I was making Archer's lunch for school. I confronted her that evening after Archer went to bed. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look sorry. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for me to find out so she wouldn't have to be the one to say it. She told me she'd been unhappy for years, that I was boring, that I smelled like metal and sweat when I came home, that she wanted more from life than a 3-bedroom house in Round Rock and a husband who thought a good Friday night was watching a movie with his kid. I remember sitting at the kitchen table after she said all that, just staring at the placemat Archer had made in art class. It had a crayon drawing of our family, 3 stick figures holding hands, a big sun in the corner. And I thought, this kid has no idea what's about to happen to his world. Jolene moved out 2 weeks later. She went to Cordell's condo in downtown Austin. She took her clothes, her laptop, the good coffee maker, and about half of my ability to trust another human being. What she didn't take was Archer. She said she needed time to figure herself out, that Cordell's place wasn't set up for a kid, that she'd come get him on weekends once things settled down. The weekends turned into every other weekend, then once a month, then birthdays and holidays, then just holidays, then just Christmas, and even that got spotty. I didn't badmouth her to Archer. Not once. Every time he asked where mommy was, I told him she loved him and she was just going through some grown-up stuff. Every time she canceled a visit, I made up an excuse so he wouldn't feel rejected. I took him to the park, to the movies, to every single Little League game and science fair and parent-teacher conference alone, sitting in those tiny chairs designed for adults half my size, smiling and clapping like I wasn't dying inside. I raised that boy by myself. I taught him to ride a bike, to drive, sat with him through algebra homework that made us both want to throw the textbook out the window. I worked overtime to pay for braces, summer camp, new cleats every season because his feet wouldn't stop growing. I was there for the nightmares, the stomach bugs, the first heartbreak when a girl named Presley told him she just wanted to be friends in 7th grade. I held that kid together with duct tape and dad jokes and sheer stubbornness. And Jolene? She married Cordell. They moved to Scottsdale. She started calling herself a lifestyle consultant, which as far as I could tell meant she posted pictures of smoothies on Instagram and charged people to tell them to drink more water. She'd call Archer maybe once a month, send gifts that were always a little too young for him, like she'd frozen him in time at whatever age she left. She'd show up once or twice a year for a visit, swoop in like a tornado of perfume and shopping bags, take him to dinner, tell him how much she missed him, and then disappear again. And every single time she left, I'd find him sitting on his bed, quiet, staring at the wall. And I'd sit next to him and put my arm around him and not say a word, because sometimes the best thing a dad can do is just be there. Just be the one who stays. By the time Archer graduated high school, I thought the worst of it was behind us. He got into Texas State, decided to study business, and I drove him to campus myself with his entire life crammed into the back of my truck. I didn't cry in front of him. I made it exactly 2 blocks before I had to pull over because I couldn't see the road. I thought we were solid. I thought that bond was unbreakable. Turns out I was wrong, because somewhere between freshman year and senior year, Jolene started calling more, visiting more. She and Cordell had split up, shocker, and suddenly she had all this free time and guilt and energy to pour into being the mom she never was. And Archer, my sweet, people-pleasing kid, let her right back in. I didn't say anything. I figured he was old enough to make his own choices. I figured he'd see through it eventually. I figured wrong. Because 3 years after reconnecting with his mother, my son got engaged to a wonderful girl named Sutton. And when the wedding invitations went out, my name was nowhere on them. Jolene's was right there in elegant script, mother of the groom. And when I called Archer to ask about it, he said something that I still hear in my head when it's quiet. Dad, she's trying. Can you just let her have this one thing? That one thing turned out to be everything. I want to be fair here, because I know how this sounds. I know some of you are already typing comments about how I should have spoken up sooner, set boundaries, had a real conversation with Archer about how I was feeling. And you're right, I should have. But here's the thing about being a single dad for 15 years. You get so used to putting your kids' feelings first that you forget you're allowed to have your own. You get so used to being the stable one, the quiet one, the one who absorbs the hit and keeps moving, that when someone finally asks you to step aside, your first instinct isn't to fight. It's to comply, because that's what you've always done. You've always made it work. You've always swallowed it down. So when Archer told me to let Jolene have this, I said okay. I told myself it was just the invitation. She probably helped pay for the printing or something. It didn't mean anything. He'd still want me involved. I was his dad. I raised him. There was no version of this wedding where I wasn't front and center. Except there was. And I walked right into it. The wedding planning started about 8 months before the ceremony. Sutton's parents, a couple from Dripping Springs named Hank and Rosalind, were handling most of the logistics. I liked them a lot. Hank and I had bonded over college football at the engagement dinner, and Rosalind always included me in group texts about the planning. But Jolene had inserted herself into the process like she was producing a Netflix special. She flew in from Arizona every other month, attended cake tastings, went dress shopping with Sutton, helped pick the venue, the flowers, the photographer. She was everywhere. And every time I'd call Archer to ask if he needed anything from me, he'd say, "Mom's already got it covered." Mom. She was Mom now. Not Jolene. Not my mother. Mom. Like she'd earned it. Like showing up for cake tastings erased a decade of absence. I tried to be involved. I offered to help pay for the rehearsal dinner, which is traditionally the groom's family's responsibility. Archer said Jolene had already covered it. I offered to help with the seating chart. He said Sutton's mom and Jolene were handling it. I asked if he wanted to go suit shopping together, just the two of us, like we used to go to the barber together when he was little. He said he'd already gone with Jolene and Cordell's old tailor in Scottsdale. Wait, I'm sorry. Let me rewind that. He went suit shopping with his mother, the woman who left when he was 9. The woman who chose a leased BMW and a man with bleached teeth over tucking him in at night. She got to take him suit shopping for his wedding. And I got a text that said, "Already handled, Dad. But thanks." I sat in my truck in the driveway for about 40 minutes after that text. Just sat there. The engine wasn't even running. I just stared at the garage door and tried to figure out when I became an afterthought in my own son's life. The rehearsal dinner was at a steakhouse in downtown Austin, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices. When I walked in, Jolene was already holding Cord at the head of the table, laughing with Sutton's bridesmaids, calling Archer my baby boy loud enough for everyone to hear. When she saw me, she gave me a diplomatic smile, the kind you'd give someone at a networking event whose name you can't remember. "Nolan, so glad you could make it," she said. Like I was a guest. Like I'd been invited out of courtesy rather than biology. I sat at the far end of the table next to Hank, who poured me a glass of wine without asking, and said, "You doing okay?" I told him I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I've been not fine so many times that I've gotten good at pretending. During dinner, Jolene gave a speech about how watching Archer grow into a man had been the greatest joy of her life. She actually said those words. And nobody flinched. Nobody looked at me. Nobody seemed to remember she watched him grow up from 1,200 miles away through a phone screen she barely checked. I didn't give a speech. Nobody asked me to. The wedding was 2 weeks later. A Saturday in October, golden light pouring through live oaks at a restored barn on the outskirts of Wimberley. I showed up early because I wanted to see Archer before the ceremony, shake his hand, maybe fix his tie, tell him something a father says to his son on his wedding day. I found the groom's suite. Archer was in there with his groomsmen. And Jolene. She was adjusting his boutonniere, telling him he looked like a movie star. When I walked in, the room got just a little bit quieter. Not silent, just quieter. Like my presence changed the temperature by half a degree. "Hey, Dad," Archer said. He looked happy, genuinely happy. And I couldn't even be upset, because all I've ever wanted is for him to be happy. That's the cruelest part. Every bit of pain I've swallowed has been because I wanted that kid to smile. I told him he looked great. I told him Sutton was a lucky woman. He thanked me. Jolene watched the whole exchange like a nature documentary observer. She didn't say a word to me, just watched. Then she said, "Archer, honey, the photographer needs us for family portraits in 10. Us, not all of us. Her and him." She'd arranged a separate session, just the two of them. No session for me and Archer. When I asked the wedding coordinator, a frantic woman named Margot, she looked confused and said she only had the mother of the groom session on the timeline. I said don't worry about it, because what was I going to do? Cause a scene on my son's wedding day? I stepped aside. Again, the ceremony was beautiful. I'll give it that. Sutton looked stunning. Archer cried when he saw her. And the officiant gave a sermon about love and commitment that would have been really inspiring if I hadn't been sitting in the fourth row wondering why I wasn't in the first. After the ceremony, everyone moved into the barn for the reception. I went to find my seat. I checked the seating chart near the entrance, one of those big, elegant boards with calligraphy and little escort cards. I looked for my name. I looked through the whole thing. Every table, every card. My name wasn't on it. I stood there for probably 2 full minutes, reading every card twice, thinking I was losing my mind. I asked Margot. She flipped through her papers, checked her tablet, and then got this look on her face. The look someone gets when they realize something terrible has happened and they don't know how to tell you. "I'm so sorry, sir. It seems like there might have been an oversight. Let me see if I can add a chair to one of the tables." An oversight. My name was an oversight at my own son's wedding. She found me a spot at a table near the back, next to a couple of Sutton's college friends who had no idea who I was. I sat there while the head table filled up. Archer, Sutton, Sutton's parents, Jolene, the best man, the maid of honor. 6 seats, not 7. And then the speeches started. The best man, the maid of honor. Hank gave a beautiful toast about Sutton. And then Jolene stood up at the head table at my son's wedding and gave a speech about motherhood, about sacrifice. about how being Archer's mom taught her what it means to love unconditionally. The room clapped. Archer looked at her with tears in his eyes. And I couldn't breathe. I got up from my table. I walked outside. Nobody noticed. The night air hit my face, and I just stood there on the gravel path next to a row of lavender bushes, looking back through the window at my ex-wife basking in applause for a job she never did. And I thought, I should be up there. That should be me. I'm the one who stayed. I watched the rest of the reception through that window. I saw the first dance. I saw the cake cutting. I saw Jolene pull Archer onto the dance floor for the mother-son dance. And I saw them laughing and spinning under those string lights while 300 people watched and smiled. There was no father-son dance. It wasn't on the program. I left around 10. I didn't say goodbye. I just got in my truck and drove home in the dark, still wearing that rented suit, still hearing that speech in my head. I sat in my living room with the lights off for a long time. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was somewhere beyond it. In that flat gray place where you've been hurt so deeply that your body just stops reacting. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Archer. You didn't even say goodbye. And something in me just broke. I stared at that text for a long time. You didn't even say goodbye. 5 words. Like I was the one who left. Like I was the one who walked out. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I didn't respond right away. Partly because I didn't know what to say, and partly because I was afraid that if I started typing, everything I'd been holding in for 15 years would come pouring out in one giant, unhinged wall of text that would end with me being the bad guy somehow. Because that's how it works when you're the quiet one. The moment you finally speak up, everyone acts like you're the problem. So instead, I did what I always do when I'm hurting. I went to work. I'd been running my own welding and fabrication business for about 6 years at that point. Started it with a used truck, a portable welder, and a reputation I'd built over 2 decades of showing up on time and doing clean work. It wasn't a huge operation, just me and 3 guys, but we had steady contracts with construction firms and ranchers across Central Texas. Custom gates, structural repairs, ornamental metalwork. Honest work that kept my hands busy and my mind from wandering to places I didn't want it to go. But after the wedding, I couldn't focus. I'd be in the middle of a bead and my hand would start shaking. I'd catch myself sitting in the shop at 5 in the morning, staring at nothing, running that text through my head on a loop. You didn't even say goodbye. Like it was my fault. Like I chose to leave. Like standing outside a window watching my ex-wife steal my moment was somehow a conscious decision I made for fun. My buddy Deacon noticed. Deacon was my shop foreman, a former Marine with a beard like a lumberjack and the emotional intelligence of a therapist disguised as a welder. He'd been with me since I started the business, and he could read me better than most people I'd known my whole life. One morning he walked into the shop, found me sitting on a bucket with my welding hood in my lap, and just pulled up another bucket and sat down next to me. You want to talk about it? Or you want me to pretend you're fine? He said. I told him everything. The wedding, the seating chart, the speech, the window, the text, all of it. And when I was done, he sat there for a minute, rubbing his jaw like he was trying to decide whether to say something measured and wise or something that would get him in trouble. He went with honest. Nolan, you've spent your whole life being the guy who doesn't make waves. And that's a good quality. It really is. But at some point, you've got to ask yourself whether being the bigger person has cost you the one person who matters most. That landed like a sledgehammer. Because he was right. I'd been so busy being noble, being the dad who never badmouthed his ex, who never forced his kid to choose sides, who never once said a bad word about Jolene, even when she deserved a whole dictionary of them, that I'd let the narrative get rewritten without me in it. Jolene had swooped back in, recast herself as the devoted mother, and because I never challenged it, Archer believed it. Of course he did. He was a kid when she left, and she came back with a smile and a credit card and all the time in the world. I came with calluses and a packed lunch and the same quiet presence I'd always had. I started therapy 2 weeks later. Found a counselor named Dr. Tatum who specialized in family estrangement. First session, she asked me to describe my relationship with Archer in 1 sentence. I said, I gave him everything, and he doesn't know it. She said, that's not a relationship. That's a sacrifice nobody asked you to document. That stung, but she was right. I'd been keeping a mental ledger of every diaper changed, every game attended, every tear wiped, and I was furious that Archer hadn't added it up the same way I had. But he was 26. He didn't remember the specifics. and Jolene had filled in the gaps with her version. The version where she left because she was struggling, not because she was selfish. The version where she came back because she loved him, not because Cordell dumped her and she was lonely. Dr. Tatum told me to sit with my anger, actually feel it instead of burying it, and then decide what I wanted. Not what a good dad would want. What I, Nolan, actually wanted. And what I wanted was simple. I wanted my son to see me. Really see me. For once. But before that could happen, I needed to get my own life together. Because here's what nobody tells you about spending 15 years in survival mode. When the emergency finally ends, you fall apart. The adrenaline stops. The purpose fades. And you're left standing in the rubble of your own neglected life, wondering who you even are outside of being someone's dad. I threw myself into the business. Took on bigger contracts. Bid on a project with a boutique hotel chain that was renovating properties across the hill country. Won it. It was the biggest contract I'd ever landed. Custom ironwork for 6 properties, railings, light fixtures, decorative gates. It meant hiring 2 more guys and buying new equipment. And for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't grief or exhaustion. I felt momentum. I also started doing things for myself. Sounds simple, but I hadn't done that in years. I started cooking real meals instead of eating cereal over the sink at 10 at night. I fixed up my back porch, added some Adirondack chairs and string lights, and started spending evenings out there with a book and a beer instead of staring at my phone waiting for a text that never came. I joined a woodworking class at the community center because I'd always wanted to try it, and I ended up making a walnut cutting board that I was embarrassingly proud of. And then I met Gemma. She was a landscape architect who worked on one of the hotel renovation projects I was contracted for. We met when she walked into my shop to discuss some custom planter brackets and immediately tripped over a welding cable and knocked over a stack of metal samples. She looked up at me from the floor with this expression that was half mortified and half amused, and she said, "Well, that's one way to make an entrance." I laughed for the first time in weeks, maybe months. Gemma wasn't like Jolene. She was steady. She drove a truck with mud on the tires and kept a pocket notebook full of plant species. When I told her about Archer, the whole story, she didn't give me a pitying look. She just said, "That sounds incredibly lonely." She was right. We started dating slowly. She met Deacon and the crew, who approved immediately because she brought breakfast tacos to the shop one morning, which is basically a blood oath in Texas. I didn't tell Archer about her. He hadn't called since that text, and I wasn't ready to open that door. 6 months passed. The hotel contract was thriving. My shop had doubled in size. Gemma had essentially moved in, though we were both pretending she hadn't by maintaining the fiction that she kept her own apartment for her plants. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that was mine. Not for Archer. Not in spite of Jolene. For me. And then one Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was Hank, Sutton's dad. The man who'd poured me wine at that rehearsal dinner and looked at me like he understood. "Nolan," he said, "I think there's something you need to know." He told me that Jolene had been telling people, Archer included, that I had chosen not to participate in the wedding, that I'd declined the seating arrangement, that I'd refused to give a speech, that I'd left early because I was uncomfortable being around her. She had rewritten the entire night, flipped the script so cleanly that even Sutton had started believing it. Hank said he'd kept quiet because he didn't want to cause problems between Archer and his mother. But Rosalind had finally told him he needed to say something, because it wasn't right. Because she'd seen me standing outside that window, and she'd never been able to shake the image. I thanked Hank. I hung up the phone. I sat on my back porch under those string lights with Gemma's hand on my knee, and I let myself feel the full weight of what Jolene had done. Not just at the wedding. Not just in the years after. From the very beginning. She had always been the one writing the story, and I had always been the one too loyal to correct it. But not anymore. I didn't do anything impulsive. That's important, because the old Nolan would have either swallowed it down and moved on, or called Archer in a fit of emotion and said something I couldn't take back. But I'd been in therapy for 6 months, and if Dr. Tatum had taught me anything, it was that the truth doesn't need volume. It just needs evidence. I started by writing a letter. Not an angry one. Not a guilt trip. Just a letter that laid out, calmly and specifically, what actually happened at the wedding and in the years leading up to it. I wrote about the seating chart. I wrote about the missing father-son dance. I wrote about standing outside the window. I wrote about every weekend visit Jolene canceled, every birthday she forgot, every time I covered for her so Archer wouldn't feel the rejection. I didn't send it. Not yet. Dr. Tatum said the letter was for me first. To get it out of my head and onto paper. To see it clearly. To know that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't misremembering, that what happened to me was real and it mattered. I also called Hank back. Not to ask him to fight my battle, but to ask him a question. Does Sutton know the truth? He said Sutton had her doubts. She'd noticed things at the wedding, things that didn't add up, like why the father of the groom was sitting at a back table, like why nobody had asked me to speak, like why Jolene seemed to be running the whole show. But she hadn't pushed it because Archer shut down whenever anyone brought up the subject. He'd say, "My dad's complicated," and change the topic. Complicated. I raised him alone for 15 years, and I was complicated. Jolene abandoned him for a decade, and she was redeemed. There's a certain kind of cruelty in that math. Hank also told me something I wasn't expecting. He said Jolene had been borrowing money from Archer and Sutton. Not huge amounts, but consistently. 1,000 here, 2,000 there, always with a story. Car trouble, medical bill, investment opportunity, and she never paid any of it back. Hank said Rosalind had been keeping track because Sutton mentioned it in passing, and the total was somewhere north of $15,000 in the 18 months since the wedding. I filed that away, not because I was looking for ammunition, but because it painted a picture. Jolene hadn't come back into Archer's life because she loved him. She came back because she needed him. There's a difference, and it's a big one. I spent the next few weeks being strategic. Gemma helped, not because I asked her to, but because she's the kind of person who sees a problem and immediately starts organizing a solution. She suggested I gather everything, not just my memories, but anything tangible. Old photos, school records, medical receipts, communication logs. Anything that showed who was actually there for Archer's childhood. So I dug through boxes in the garage, and what I found nearly broke me all over again, but in a different way. I found every report card, signed by me. Every permission slip, signed by me. Every doctor's visit record with my name as the emergency contact. I found a folder of school projects Archer had made over the years, and in at least 4 of them, under the section that said, "My family," he'd drawn me. Just me. No mom. No second figure. Just a tall stick man with brown hair and a big smile, labeled Dad. I found the old phone records too. I'd kept them during the divorce because my lawyer told me to document everything. The call log showed Jolene calling Archer maybe twice a month in the first year after she left. Then once a month. Then sporadically. There were stretches of 3 for months with no calls at all. I had it all in black and white. Gemma helped me organize everything into a binder. She didn't make it dramatic or legal looking. She just put it in chronological order, with tabs, so that if anyone ever looked at it, they could see the whole story laid out plainly. Year by year. Who was there? Who wasn't? I also did something I'd never done before. I reached out to people from Archer's childhood. His old Little League coach, a guy named Sullivan who ran the Round Rock Rattlers and still remembered Archer's batting stance. I called his 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Embry, who told me she'd kept a note I wrote to her once, thanking her for being patient with Archer during a rough patch after Jolene left. I talked to my old neighbor Loretta, who used to watch Archer when I had to work late and who had a memory like a steel trap. Every single one of them confirmed the same thing. Nolan was the one who was there. Jolene was a ghost. I wasn't building a legal case. I was building the truth. The truth that had been slowly erased by a woman who was better at telling stories than living them. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Archer and Sutton had their first anniversary, and Hank told me things were rocky. Not between Archer and Sutton, they were solid, but between Archer and Jolene. Turns out, the money requests had gotten more frequent. Jolene had asked Archer to co-sign a lease on a new apartment after she got evicted from her old one. She'd also started making comments about Sutton, subtle jabs about how she was controlling, how Archer needed to stand up for himself, how family should come first. Classic manipulation tactics dressed up as motherly concern. Sutton, to her enormous credit, wasn't having it. She'd grown up with Hank and Rosalind, 2 of the most grounded people I'd ever met, and she could smell manipulation like a bloodhound. She told Archer she thought Jolene was using him. That sparked a fight, their first real fight. And according to Hank, after the dust settled, Archer sat in their kitchen and said something that Sutton later repeated to her parents. I don't know who to believe anymore. That was my opening. Not to swoop in and destroy Jolene. Not to gloat or punish or say I told you so. But to finally, After all these years, let the truth speak for itself. I called Archer. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text that said, "I'd like to see you. No pressure. No agenda. Just a conversation." He didn't reply for 3 days. Then, on a Thursday night, he texted back 2 words. "This weekend?" We met at a barbecue place in Lockhart, a neutral spot with good brisket and long communal tables where nobody would overhear anything too personal over the sound of football on the TV. I got there early, because I'm me, and I sat at a table near the back with the binder in a canvas bag at my feet and a knot in my stomach the size of a softball. When Archer walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Not because he looked different, because he looked tired. The kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep. He had circles under his eyes, and his shoulders were carrying something heavy. He looked like I felt for most of my 30s. He sat down across from me and said, "Hey, Dad." And for a moment, I was back in that hospital room 26 years ago, holding a tiny baby with a full head of dark hair, swearing I'd protect him from everything. I hadn't done a perfect job, but I'd done the job. "Hey, Bud," I said. "Thanks for coming." We ordered food. We made small talk. I asked about Sutton, about work, about the new apartment they'd moved into. He asked about the business. I told him about the hotel contracts, about expanding the shop. I did not mention Gemma. Not yet. One thing at a time. And then, when the plates were cleared and the noise around us had softened into that late afternoon lull, I set the binder on the table. Before I say anything, I told him, "I want you to know that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm not doing this to turn you against your mother. I'm doing this because you deserve to know what actually happened. All of it. And you can do whatever you want with it after. But you're going to hear the truth from me at least once, because I should have told you a long time ago." Archer looked at the binder, then at me, then back at the binder. "What is this?" he asked. I opened it to the first page. A school enrollment form from 2009. Father, Nolan Carver. Mother, left blank. Emergency contact, Nolan Carver. Second emergency contact, Loretta Finch, neighbor. "This," I said, "is your childhood." And then I started talking. For the first time in 15 years, I stopped protecting Jolene. I stopped cushioning the blow. I stopped being the bigger person. I just told the truth. And I watched my son's face change with every page. I didn't rush it. I went year by year, the way Gemma had organized it. And I let the documents do most of the talking. I showed Archer the phone records from the first 2 years after Jolene left. The call log that went from sporadic to nearly non-existent. I showed him the medical records, every ER visit, every pediatrician appointment, every time I'd sat in a waiting room filling out forms with one hand and holding his in the other. I showed him the school projects where he'd drawn our family as just the 2 of us. He stared at those the longest. I told him about the nights, the ones I never talked about. The night he had croup so bad I drove him to the hospital at 2 in the morning and sat in a plastic chair for 4 hours because I didn't have anyone to call. The night Jolene was supposed to come for his 10th birthday and didn't show, and I drove to 3 different stores to find the exact Lego set he wanted so the day wouldn't be a total loss. I told him about covering for her. Every single time. When she canceled visits, I told him she had work stuff. When she forgot to call on Christmas, I told him the phone lines were messed up. When she sent gifts 2 sizes too small, I returned them quietly and bought the right size and put her name on the card. Archer's face had gone very still. He wasn't crying. He was doing that thing he used to do as a kid when something hurt, and he didn't want to show it. This tight-jawed, straight-ahead stare, like he was trying to hold himself together through sheer willpower. I recognized it because I'd done the same thing at the wedding. "She told me you didn't want to give a speech," he said quietly. "At the wedding. She said you told the coordinator you didn't feel comfortable." "I was never asked," I said. "And there was no seat for me at the head table. My name wasn't on any seating chart. Archer. I watched your mother give a speech about unconditional love through a window. From outside." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "What?" "Rosalind saw me. You can ask her." I stood outside because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to make a scene on your day, so I just stood there. And then I went home. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Archer put both hands flat on the table, like he was trying to steady himself. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. And then he said something that broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to have to choose. I never wanted you to choose. I just wanted you to know." He sat with that for a long time. I didn't fill the silence. Dr. Tatum had taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone sit with the truth without trying to manage their reaction to it. So I let him sit. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled for a minute, and I watched his expression shift. He was reading old texts from Jolene. Whatever he saw confirmed something, because he put the phone down and rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. "She told me you pulled away," he said. "She said that after the divorce, you made it clear you didn't want her involved. She said she tried to be part of my life, but you made it hard. Archer, I drove you to her hotel every single time she bothered to show up. I packed your bag with your favorite pajamas and your stuffed dinosaur, and I sat in the parking lot until she brought you back. I never once made it hard. I made it as easy as I possibly could, because I didn't want you to lose your mom, even though she'd already left." He dropped his head, not in shame, in grief. The kind of grief that comes when you realize the story you've been living in wasn't real. When the foundation you built your understanding on turns out to be someone else's lie. "I'm sorry, Dad. You don't need to apologize to me. You were a kid. She was your mom. You believed what she told you because you wanted it to be true. I understand that. I don't blame you for that. But the wedding, I should have. I didn't even notice you were gone. That's not your fault either. You were getting married. You were supposed to be focused on Sutton. The people who were supposed to make sure I was included, they didn't. And I should have spoken up. That's on me." We sat there for another hour. He asked questions, lots of them, about the years I'd kept quiet about, the specifics I'd sheltered him from. I answered everyone honestly. When he asked if Jolene had been borrowing money, I told him what Hank had told me. His jaw tightened in a way that told me he already knew more than he'd admitted. Before we left, I told him about Gemma. I told him she was kind and steady, and that she made me feel like I was allowed to have a life outside of being his dad. He looked at me with this expression I hadn't seen since he was a little kid. This mix of surprise and something close to wonder, like he was seeing me as a person for the first time and not just a parent. "I want to meet her," he said. I told him he would. What happened next didn't happen overnight. Real reconciliation never does. But it happened. Archer started piecing things together on his own. He talked to Hank and Rosalind, who told him what they'd seen at the wedding. He talked to Sullivan, his old Little League coach, who confirmed I never missed a single game. He talked to Mrs. Embry, who read him the note I'd written her 18 years ago, and apparently he had to pull over on the drive home because he couldn't see through the tears. And he talked to Jolene. I wasn't part of that conversation, but Sutton called me afterward. She said Archer confronted his mother calmly, laid out everything he'd learned, and asked her to explain. Jolene's response was textbook. She cried. She deflected. She said I'd poisoned him against her. She said the binder was propaganda. But here's the thing about the truth. When it's documented and corroborated by a dozen people, the tearful denial routine stops working. Jolene made one last play. She called Archer and told him that if he chose me over her, she'd never speak to him again. The same woman who left him when he was 9 threatened to leave him again. And this time, Archer didn't flinch. "That's your choice, Mom," he told her. "But I'm done pretending." She didn't call back. That was 8 months ago. Jolene hasn't reached out since. She's back in Scottsdale, and I hope she finds peace someday. Not because she deserves it, but because holding on to bitterness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person gets sick. As for me and Archer, we're rebuilding. He and Sutton came over for dinner last month. Gemma made her brisket, which I'm pretty sure is the reason Archer now calls her every Sunday. They spent the whole evening on the back porch while Archer and I sat in those Adirondack chairs and did what we've always done best. Just being together, quietly, the way we used to when he was small and the whole world was just the two of us. He asked me to redo the family portraits. Just us this time. Me, him, Sutton, and Gemma. We did them at the shop because Archer said that's where his real memories are. The photographer got a shot of us standing in front of a custom gate I'd built for one of the hotel projects. All of us laughing because Gemma tripped over the same welding cable she tripped over the first time I met her. It's framed on my mantle now, right next to the old crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a big sun. Except now there are 4 figures, and the sun is still shining. Last week, Archer called me on a random Wednesday afternoon. No reason, no occasion. He just called to talk. We talked about football and brisket rubs and whether his new couch was too firm. And right before he hung up, he said something I'd been waiting 26 years to hear. "Hey, Dad, I just want you to know. I see you. I see everything you did. And I'm sorry it took me this long. I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. I told him I loved him. And then I hung up the phone, sat on my porch, looked out at the hill country sky turning gold and pink over the live oaks, and I let myself feel it. Not the pain, not the anger, not the grief, just the quiet, overwhelming warmth of being known by the person who matters most. I'm 47 years old. I've got a business I built from nothing, a woman who trips over things and loves me anyway, and a son who finally sees the whole picture. My ex-wife is a footnote. The wedding is a memory I can hold without flinching. And that text, the one that said, "You didn't even say goodbye," I don't hear it anymore when it's quiet. Instead, I hear the last thing Archer said before he hung up on Wednesday. "Talk to you tomorrow, Dad." And he did.